Welcome back, everybody. We're here for episode 17 of The Power of You in New York City. We're super excited to be back with you. And today, Bill, the topic that came to mind as I was in the car driving down here was around resistance and how in our personal growth journeys, many of us feel this resistance. And I wanted to talk about it a little bit today because I think that it can block a lot of us from pursuing things that will grow and evolve us because we maybe misunderstand what resistance is. We maybe think, oh, well, it's an indication that I shouldn't go that way or I shouldn't try that new thing. So today I really wanted to kind of shed some light on the topic of resistance, what it is, what it feels like, so that people can identify it. And then, yeah, hopefully we can reframe how you think about resistance. So I guess to open up and start, Bill, what does resistance look or feel like to you?
Well, there's two types of resistance, but they seem to be the same thing. So it's a matter of discriminating between this is just something that I've had a mental block against doing forever, and I'm still stubbornly sticking to it versus uh, I have a sudden hunch that this guy is lying to me. So the resistance could be a good thing or a bad thing, but therefore, the best way to deal with it works for me anyway, I hope it works for you, is to just take a moment whenever I'm feeling uncomfortable in any way and just try to open my mind to, I could go either way, right? And why don't I just jump in? Seems interesting. I haven't done this before. Or um, just, um, it's kind of like a mental muscle you have to release. And it's not just so mental, it's also in your body. Your body is carrying a lot of the resistance. So you feel it in your body. There's tension, the back of your neck is tight. I mean, all these details. Life is moving pretty quickly, so you're not going to take a long time to analyze things. But if you just take that extra moment to think about boldness, daring, enjoying life, doing new things, and if you feel a really strong resistance, okay, go within and figure it out later. Go back to it in your contemplative moment when you're out of the situation and think about whether it would have been more fun to go the other way and not stay blocked from doing that thing, or whether you made the right move in that case.
Yeah, well, I think that's interesting, right? Because you've said that it's not just mental, it's also physical too. And I definitely have that same understanding of resistance because you can literally feel it in your body. I felt myself before like coming out in like almost like a rash, right? Because it's just something that you don't want to deal with or you don't want to look at. And I think at first it can represent itself as an like a sign like, "Nope, I'm not gonna go over there." The resistance that is in our bodies as well as our minds is actually telling us, "No, that's not the way to go." But I I think it's important to actually reframe this because we've talked about this a number of times. Not every thought is true or logical. So I think this is about inquiring into that thought to understand the validity of it because it's not always true. It's not always true. And with this, I think what we need to do is inquire. So if you notice those feelings in your body, it's first, like you say, just being able to stop and recognize that what you are feeling is resistance and almost put a name to it because I think without understanding what it is, it's very easy to confuse it with just a block and it's I shouldn't go that way. But actually, if we are able to understand it and name that resistance, it will enable us to recognize it and then be able to inquire before we even take any action, right? It's to be able to inquire as to what this feeling is inside your body.
And the interesting thing is that if you feel that in your body and you relax, you consciously relax your body, it changes your mind. It- the body can affect the mind that way. So it goes both ways. And it might be easier to relax your body than your mind. So do it. And it's interesting that you say that naming something helps you deal with it. That's definitely a bedrock principle of everything we talk about.
Yeah.
Is that um, life goes on and it goes on and it goes on, and some of it feels good, some of it doesn't feel so good. You're not sure which direction you're going in. Now you are sure. No, you're not sure anymore. All of that stuff is going on. Most people aren't tracking it consciously. They're not studying it to see, well, there's a recurring pattern. I always seem to dodge away from this situation. Whenever a pretty girl comes up to me at a cocktail party, I find some excuse to turn away to the male friend I've been talking to and kind of brush her off. So why do I do that? That's the seventh or eighth time. I wasn't counting, but now that I look back at it, what is this thing? Or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, and I think it is about that pattern recognition. And I know for me, just an example, I mean, this can show up in so many areas of our life, right? When it comes to growth. I know for me personally, what's just coming up in my mind right now is where I felt great resistance was around finances and money when I started the business. Actually, the thought of like looking at the books, it brought me out in like a cold sweat, right? And I think it is that pattern recognition to help you understand that actually this is a habit and this habit is actually pointing me towards something. But in the moment, it can feel like, nope, I don't want to look there. And anybody that tries to help you or guide you in that certain way, you can find yourself projecting onto them because you actually is something so deep inside that you don't want to look at that you can kind of end up projecting onto people that are trying to help you as well. So I think it takes some level of self awareness to understand when you're feeling this or how you're feeling, and then noticing the patterns before being able to like inquire as to why that's happening. Because it's very easy for us to, in all aspects of growth, it could be you've had a child and maybe the grandmother is like showing you how to or trying to help with the baby or something like that. And you could find yourself being resistant and projecting out, or it could be in your work, it could be finances, it could be in any manner of different things. But I think, it's about understanding where resistance is showing up for you. But again, it is that pattern recognition and the self-awareness to understand, okay, why am I reacting like this? Why am I feeling that way? And we've talked about this a lot, like, but emotions are just clues. So can you inquire into what that clue is actually trying to communicate to you?
I think that um, you can do something in the moment, but you don't have a lot of time. So you can't do a lot in the moment. So one thing you could do in the moment is make sure your body's relaxed. Another thing you can do in the moment is just ask yourself, do I trust these people? And if I do, why don't I just let it all hang out and not hold anything back? You can do quick, relax tricks like that. But then there's the contemplating it later is always a good thing to do. Um, like at the end of a day, let your mind go back over the day. What were the things that you enjoyed the most? What were the things that were like uncomfortable? Um, Sometimes you don't have to do that because the mind goes there and brings you back to a moment. And often we brush it off and we ignore it, but we shouldn't. If the mind brings something back up, there's probably a good reason for that. So give it some attention now that you're in a separate space where nothing's rushing you and you can take as much time as you want. There's always value in going back and looking at where you played a good shot and then where you dug up a divot that you're gonna have to replace, so figure out how to do it better next time. Uh, that kind of a delayed reaction self-awareness is also a valuable tool. The thing you said about projecting onto other people and, blaming them for things. If you study, the things that his followers, uh, wrote down, because the Buddha never actually wrote anything, but his followers wrote up all of his ideas. Sometimes you see different interpretations, and like he said, he didn't say that, he said this, so there's many splinter groups within Buddhism, but they're nice to each other. Anyway, the main thing he was trying to get people to see is that they are individually responsible for whatever they experience. Nobody else made it happen. They made it happen. Whatever they're experiencing, they made it happen. And that's hard for us to accept. Like if you're walking down the street perfectly innocent and a bully comes up and mugs you. Mm, How, you know, how could I have caused that? Well, did you have to walk in that neighborhood? Was that slightly a dangerous neighborhood? Yeah. You were aware of that before? Yeah. So you made the choice to do it. So that's why it's your responsibility, why you caused it. So that cause and effect, we're always the cause.
Yeah, I think as well though, everything that happens, and we both agree on this, is like everything that happens in our life is to teach us something. And even when that's not like always a pleasant lesson, it is a lesson nonetheless if we take it that way. Um, but again, we can find ourselves not wanting to look for the lesson because looking for the lesson can sometimes feel quite painful. It can feel quite challenging and almost as if our very reality that we have constructed will crumble if we do look to the lesson. So that's again another sign of resistance, right? Because not only can we be resistant to growth in certain areas, but we can also be resistant to being like being introspective as well. And that's another form of resistance because actually the thing that underpins that is that okay, if I do self-reflect, the very paradigm that I orbit or like live in at the moment could crumble. So that even the self-reflection can feel challenging to people because it's the art of doing that is actually somewhere subconsciously, your body and mind knows that by looking here, something will change. And we can say that we want things in our life, or we want to be a better speaker, or I want to be, a successful business person. I want to be a great mom, dad, whatever it is. We can say that we want these things, but actually we block ourselves with this like with not doing this introspection a lot of the time because it can feel like, well, it's easier just not to look there. I want the results, but I don't want to do the work, right? And it's not through badness, like people don't want to do the work. It's hard. It's hard. I know. Like going on this journey myself, it's really difficult to have to look at yourself again and again and again. And it's triggering and it's challenging, but you have to be willing to let your world crumble again and again and again. And I know it's not easy, but that resistance is actually pointing you towards growth. It is, and I think it's about reframing the resistance you feel as rather than a blocker, it's actually pointing you towards the direction you should follow.
Yeah, it's escaping rather than crumbling. I mean, of course, if we find a comfortable work, a non-horrible, a tolerable coping pattern where nothing is really too bad, depending on our degree of pessimism, your culture, like right now, for example, is very pessimistic, and we're very vulnerable to it. 10 hours a day the average person spends with media, and most of it's pessimistic, does have an effect.
Yeah, of course.
So if you're culturally forced to be pessimistic and you don't even realize it, um, you could settle for your life as it is now rather than risk it crumbling uh, by actually having something change. So you could become very risk resistant, risk averse, uh, and um, as you say, um, the universe, life, gives us free will, and the free will gives us the ability to make errors, and the errors give us the opportunity to learn things. So it's all aimed at learning things, but you have to go through the errors to learn things. You're not really going to learn very much from things that are just going smoothly all the time. You learn from the errors, and you wouldn't be making the errors if there wasn't free will. We'd be doing everything perfectly, but it would be boring and predictable. Wouldn't be worth doing. So this is the life that we've got, and we ought to use it in a sophisticated manner, like knowing these are the ground rules. And under these ground rules, considering opportunities for change is worth doing. It's worth considering. And but there is another layer of this, which is a friend of mine who likes my writing and talks about it and so on and so forth, doesn't want to meditate. He thinks he could go crazy.
Mm.
And I think that there's a little bit of that in everybody, that if they go too far inside, they may not get out again. Uh,
Oh, I know. Yeah.
and that they're, you know, imposter syndrome, that maybe most all of us feel that we're nuts. We're really crazy, but we're covering.
Yeah.
And people don't know that we're nuts, but if we make a wrong step, they'll find out. And so let's just stay closed in the bud rather than blossoming.
And I think that's it though. It is about learning, but many of us are scared to the thing that we're scared to learn about the most is actually ourselves, right? Like that is the thing that scares us the most. And I found this so many times, through different coaching sessions. It comes out time and again. What we're actually scared of is we're scared of our own potential. We're scared of who we are if we had no limits. Right? So whenever you boil the fear down, it's like, okay, I'm scared of speaking on stage. Why are you scared of speaking on stage? I Oh, well, because somebody might judge me. They said that. When you ask why, it always seems to boil down to the fact that we're scared of our own potential. And why that absolutely terrifies us rather than excites us is, I guess, understandable to some extent because we spend our whole lives being conditioned to, you know, be practical, think inside the box, right? Like we're conditioned to want a certain type of life, right? So that when we actually even allow our minds to go outside of that box or that logical way that life must happen, or we're told that my life must happen, it can feel like this having this expansiveness or this freedom can actually feel quite terrifying because it's like, well, what we're meant to do is this loss of direction or purpose, really. I've said this before, but I think sometimes we like to keep problems in our lives because it stops us from chasing challenges or pursuing challenges. If we have problems to solve, there's always an excuse why we can't do it, right? So we almost like to create problems in our minds, in our realities, in our everyday lives, because while we have a problem to fix, we don't need to focus on a goal, right? Or a purpose. So it feels easier to stay there in problems. But actually, if you solve those problems that are in your life, this is where I see it as more you have the freedom and the expansiveness to run towards challenges. And I see problems aren't fun, right? The challenges are. And I think understanding that yes, life is a challenge, right? Like everything is a challenge. But once you clear through this resistance, these blocks, and see life as an exciting challenge and having that clear space, it's what you can create. It's a blank page. And that should bring joy. And I know that maybe that can seem quite a leap to get there. But one thing I always say is like, right now, that might feel terrifying having a blank page. That could feel terrifying to you. But by the time that you get there, it will just feel like the natural next step, right? So it is not worrying about all the steps you need to take to get to that blank space. It is just focusing on the step that is in front of you, because by the time you get there, it will just feel natural. It will feel effortless. And because you've become that person that has created the space and expansiveness in order to pursue their own challenges and find deeper meaning and purpose in everyday life.
And we're afraid of finding our own gift, following our own dreams. Um, and society does um, kind of put up barriers, uh, kind of swim lanes we have to stay in. And it does feel safer instinctively to stay inside the herd. Otherwise, if we wander outside the herd, we won't have the herd's protection. And all of that subconscious. Um, so we can't deal with it because we don't know what's going on really. Uh, and some of this comes down to one's view of life. Like if one's view of life is essentially existentialist, which used to be very hip. When I was growing up, it was very hip to read Sartre. I read him in French. And at the time, I could do that. Couldn't do that right now, I don't think. Uh, and Camus and the other existentialist philosophers, I don't know if you read them, but they're basically saying there is no meaning. This is all absurdity. The whole thing is absurd. There's no meaning. There's no purpose. And have fun, just and uh, so many of the different attractive life views that have been promulgated uh, by cultures and subcultures are leading one down the path to pure hedonism. There's nothing else to do but have fun. You know, um, many of them don't even include the idea of kindness having any value. And so this universe is an accident. Material things are the only things that count. Everything else is nonsense. That that whole philosophy of life will cause people to not trust the things we're saying and say, well, that's fine for you. You're successful people. I don't know how you did it, but you're a lucky one. So I'm a little stinker. I can't get anything right. But I'm at least limiting myself to things I can get wrong. So I don't really get myself into trouble. And you're going to get me in trouble if I listen to you. But interestingly enough, the way I wrote Mind Magic, uh, I wasn't intending or planning to do this as a way of tricking people to open their minds, but it worked out that way. The universe had it work out that way. Is that I emphasize in Mind Magic the idea of you've been programmed by other people, obviously your parents and all of that, but beyond your parents, all kinds of people have programmed you and kind of held in check the real you. And the ability to blame stuff on other people, even though it's invalid, works to help you. Mind magic works because it gets people to say, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. But I definitely do want to do it my way, not the way I've been programmed. And I can see, yes, of course I've been programmed. I was programmed to stick my pinky out when I was drinking tea, and then all the guys in the army made fun of me, et cetera, et cetera. So it's funny that by letting people blame other people, we can sometimes do good for those people who are blaming other people. But it's got to be a kind of a temporary bridge. You can't go on blaming people but you do want to get them out of your free will zone. You want to be able to be yourself, be who you really are, not be programmed, not be a robot or a mirror of other people.
And I think that's it. It's a never-ending process, right? Like continuing to shed layers of yourself that are not authentically you. I mean, we've all grown up in a society that has conditioning of all forms: the TV, the media, family, education, friends, society as a whole. We're all conditioned to a greater or lesser extent. And this is like a lifelong journey to continue to peel back the layers and become the most you have ever been, right? So it's not like it's a destination. It is a journey, and that journey, as you say, there is the purpose is to have fun a lot along that journey, and but you leaned in there to like the projection, right? Sometimes we're not enjoying it because, again, of our perspective and everything that's going on. It's very easy, or our conditioning, very easy not to enjoy this experience because we're conditioned not to enjoy it. Because actually, if we knew how powerful we were, society probably wouldn't operate, right? If we all knew how powerful we were, then, I mean, we'd all be, you know, writing on a beach in Hawaii probably. So we are programmed not to know how powerful we are, because society almost needs it for it to function in the way that it is right now. That being said, I'm a great believer that we are moving away from kind of more older traditional 9 to 5. You have to wait until you're, 65 before you retire, and you might get your pension, you might not. Like, what this is, again, my perspective, but what we're seeing on a world stage at the moment is like the crumbling of that old structure and old programming, which can feel very painful, right, as it's happening, that tower moment. And we're seeing it on a global scale, but I know that that can happen on an individual scale, right? When things start to break, it is painful, right? It's like, oh God, this isn't working for me anymore. Or and that actually, though, the way I see it is when things are going badly, this is actually like a catalyst for change. It might not always be pretty and it might not always be comfortable, but what is being birthed through that and what will come afterwards is a more evolved, aligned um, version of itself. So I talk about growth cycles a lot for individuals and understanding what these individual growth cycles look like and how things need to break in order for them to, you know, you to be reborn as a new evolved version of yourself. And that's consistent like throughout life. But also that happens on a societal level, like on a business level, on a societal level. Growth it isn't just a straight line up, right? It is this continued like breaking down in order to rebuild from a stronger place. So what if we are to think about resistance from that lens, that everything is being that's been broken is so it can be rebuilt in a stronger position. If we were to think about resistance from that lens, then actually what we are resisting is the crumbling. But with that, if we resist the crumbling, we're also resisting the growth, right?
Exactly. Well, we could minimize the suffering during the crumbling by having a better attitude toward it. If we recognize that it is an inevitable process, like uh, we're going through right now, we're going through, like in the U.S., we're learning the value of the Constitution by its being impaired at the moment. And so, like, we didn't really appreciate that it was so good until we saw it crumbling. And now we can repair it and also add some clauses to it to prevent it from being jacked around again in those same ways. Uh, yeah, the resistance um, that we started with, the idea of resistance, a lot of it comes from resisting growth, but person isn't aware of that. Uh, but it's a good thing for them, those who are listening, to remember, because when they find themselves resisting, they could just, maybe like a method actor, pretend for a moment that they're not resisting, that they're just blasé about the situation, as if they're doing it, for image sake for other people. But that'll change the way they move their body, and the body will change the mind. So just by acting that blasé, one becomes blasé. And then once you get there, uh, you feel, because you've just done something you never did before, and it's creative. You kind of start a role, perhaps, and do more in that direction. The the idea of experimenting a bit more with life could help overcome resistance. Like, we're too repetitive. We say the same things over and over again. We do everything the same. Our body language is always the same. We're so predictable. Just a little experimentation. Not only is it fun, but it could break through the resistance.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like just like trying on different outfits. You can try on a different reaction or a different response, right? Just because that is the first response that comes to you, just because it's like putting on an outfit in the morning, it doesn't mean you need to wear that outfit today. You can try something else. And I think that is a really helpful way for people to think about responding to resistance when they feel it. I think another way that is practical and would help people as well is when you feel this in your body, because you'll physically feel when it's strong resistance, you will physically feel it in your body. And even if you don't catch it in the moment, being able to catch it afterwards, like breathe. Just first of all, just breathe. Like take 3 deep breaths, because we've talked about this before. And I remember this is a line that you said to me and it stuck, and I've repeated it so many times. But it's like, if you feel anything other than a neutral at ease or just a pleasant kind of, yeah, neutral feeling or emotion, if you feel anything other than that, it is trying to indicate something to you. So even if you don't catch it in the moment, or if you do catch it in the moment, breathe, first of all. But even if you don't, afterwards, to understand if you feel anything other than that at ease, neutral feeling, this is trying to tell you something. So the fact that you have felt this level of resistance, you physically felt it into your in your body, it's telling you something. So even if you don't do it then, afterwards, inquire, okay, so why did I actually feel physically sick at the thought of looking at my business finances? Like, why did I feel physically sick about thought of getting up on stage and delivering a presentation? Like, why did I feel sick at the thought of giving my in-laws my child to look after, right? Like, what is behind that, right? Because once you start to inquire, that's when you really get to the root of it. And if you're willing to look there, as uncomfortable as it feels, if you're willing to look, you can then try on a different response, right? So it's like, next time, okay, you're going to talk to me about finances. I want to scream and run away. Right? I don't want to look, but actually, I'm going to try and just be patient. I'm going to try and be calm. I'm going to try to listen. I'm going to try to look at this as an opportunity for me to grow. And in order to do that, I need to show up as a different version of myself or give a different response. We've said it this a million times, but the definition of insanity is if you want want a different outcome to keep doing the same thing, right? So I think breathe. I try on a different response, and even if you don't catch yourself in the moment, reflect afterwards, because these feelings or emotions are being alerted to you for a reason. So you'll find yourself self-reflecting, even though you probably don't want to self-reflect. Like, even if it probably makes you cringe, even thinking about how you felt. and your response. It probably, yeah, you're probably mortified and embarrassed about it, right? But you will find that these emotions are naturally coming up to the surface because they're coming up to the surface because they're about to exit your body, right? You're about to exit your vessel. So just before something leaves, it gets really, really loud. It gets really, really loud. But when we know that that is it getting up, that's it like screaming for air, right? Before it dies. And actually, so knowing that it's coming up now, it's showing in your reality right now so that you can deal with this. Because when you deal with this, you're going to be a different person on the other side of it.
And you wanna be a strong person. You don't wanna be someone who's feeling resistance to something or feeling anything but joy. I mean, we all wanna feel joy, but you wouldn't know it from people's actions. They repeatedly go off on negative rants, you know, just because it's easier to fall into that pattern. Um, the other thing about resistance is procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think each of us, you out there, for example, um, is there anything you've been procrastinating about? Some piece of work that you just keep putting off and don't get to? Um, we all do it. What I find is that it's usually some kind of work or problem that's super complex. And it, it's not that consciously fear not being able to solve it. It is even conscious that I'm procrastinating because I have so much other work to do. It's easy to rationalize not doing some of it.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens to be that this particular pile always falls into the sum of it. So I'm procrastinating. So what I find is that all I have to do is set aside like a whole day where I'm not going to be interrupted and say, okay, this procrastination item I'm going to do this day. I'm not looking at the emails. I'm not doing anything. Then I get into it and it's a learning experience. Now, of course, I solve it. Not only do I solve it, but I get big idea out of it. It was like it was intended for me to get to it because it was a gift. And I was procrastinating and pushing it off. But maybe that was perfect. Maybe the timing worked out perfectly. Who knows?
Yeah. I trust that even in our procrastination, when we do deal with it, the timing is perfect, right? We're meant to deal with it at the exact moment that we do. But it's interesting that you bring procrastination up because it's something we all do, right? If we're all human, like we're all being guilty of doing it. I know I certainly have. And I think with procrastination, it's the thought that's challenging. It's not the action itself, because we've said this before. The action itself puts you into a space where you're learning, you're growing, and you feel expansive and you feel in flow because you are doing rather than thinking about doing. Uh, but procrastination is just a huge form of resistance. That's how it dresses itself up. We tell ourselves it's going to be really hard. This is a big project. This is something new. I don't want to look there. And I mean, I find this is what I do. I create problems that aren't actually there because I go, well, I tell myself, or I've been known to tell myself, well, I can't look at this right now because in order to look at this right now, I need to then understand X, Y, and Z. So I give myself conditions as to why I can't deal with that thing right now, right? Which is all wise. Again, that this is another example of where procrastination shows up because there's somewhere deep in our subconscious that we know this is the very direction I need to go in order to grow. But we give ourselves excuses, we tell ourselves excuses, we make up problems in our minds. And this is just how we're wired, right? Like it's not any one person's fault, it's just how we're wired. And it's about rewiring that and breaking that code down almost because it's like it's us subconsciously steering away from our own potential. That's what we're subconsciously doing because we've been wired that way. So it feels so unnatural to go against what we have been programmed to act like, right? But it's about I always see it as an angel and a devil. It's like, right, okay, the devil wants to keep you procrastinating. It wants to keep you stuck. It wants to keep you small. It doesn't want you to grow. It doesn't want you to continue to evolve, adapt, right? It wants to keep you where you have been, have always been, right? Then on the other side, it's like the angel, and it's like, if you look at this and you actually break this down, it's not that scary. It's something for your growth. It is a project, it is a skill, it is an experience, it is a conversation for your growth. And if you feel nervous about it, if it feels new, that probably means that you're growing. But I think it's great that you brought up procrastination before we finish this episode today, because I think that's something that so many of us, I mean, I know I experienced that many, many times, and it continues to happen. But I think, again, going back to pattern recognition, the more you recognize the pattern, the more the more you become self-aware of the lies that you're telling yourself. So it's like you tell yourself this lie, and then the other half of you tells yourself that no, that's a lie. So I'm lying to me. So then there's this other version of you that knows that you're lying to yourself. So there's actually nowhere to move, because it's like, okay, I can lie to myself, but then the other half of me knows that I'm lying to myself. So, which is uncomfortable, right? And I think at some point you just have to stop listening to all the noise and all the voices inside your head and just do the thing. Just do the thing, have the conversation, like try try a new skill, like try a new hobby, whatever it is that you're pulled to do. I loved what you said. Try on a different response.
You know, you and I enjoy life, and we can laugh at the jokes. A lot of people are missing the humor of it. They take it too seriously, and they take it to heart, and they blame themselves, and they feel guilty, uh, and they don't feel capable of doing these mental tricks, emotional tricks, whatever you want to call the things that we are prescribing or suggesting that people try. Hmm. But it does all rest upon one's view of life. Like, if you believe that this is a benevolent, conscious universe, you'll interpret things in a different way, and you'll be open to synchronicities that are meaningful coincidences, that the universe is telling you something, is suggesting a course of action people are ignoring. And then the hunches are also the intuition. We're receiving information, but we are ignoring it because it's just a hunch. But then it comes true, and we don't credit ourselves and say, hey, I'm ignoring a lot of hunches that work and not keeping track of that stuff. It still comes back to opening one's view of what the world is. And so there's a big resistance to the idea it, among the people who are maybe still going to church or synagogue, uh, but inside they really don't believe in God. They may believe there's something going on beyond what we know, but they don't know what it is, and they're not sure it's benevolent. So that's a huge part of the resistance. All the other forms of resistance rest on that form of resistance, of resisting just opening one's mind to the possibility that it's a benevolent universe trying to help us. So anything we can do to get people to open their minds about that would be a constructive thing to do from the standpoint of generally lowering the resistance level. And I bring it up because yesterday I was on a Zoom call with George, and he's got an AI that's going to be building an AI version of me visually. We've already got the AI speaking in my voice and everything, but now it's going to be look like me somewhat. And So my assignment was just to talk for a minute about anything. So what I said was, well, today we're going to talk about God. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. You've got this image of God flashed into your mind. As soon as I said that, an old man with a long white beard who's wearing a white robe and kind of Greek sandals. I'm not talking about that God. I'm talking about a scientific God. What do I mean by a scientific God? Isn't God like the opposite of science? Doesn't have to be. Well, how does that work? Well, we all know that we have a consciousness. We experience it directly. There's no way of denying the existence of consciousness. It would be absurd to do that. So, okay, consciousness exists. So why can't there be a very, very large consciousness? So that large consciousness is what I mean by God. It isn't any kind of superstitious or any of those things you used to associate with that word God. It's a whole new kind of God. It's science God. It's we are all one thing. The universe is one thing. And the people who invented quantum physics, Pauli, Bohr, Heisenberg, Schrödinger, uh, Planck, Einstein, they all believed that consciousness came before matter. All of them, except Niels Bohr. He had an open mind. All of the others definitely said consciousness comes first. And these are the scientists without whom we wouldn't have smartphones. We wouldn't have nanotechnology at all. We would have computers with big vacuum tubes that would be the size of buildings. Only companies and countries could afford computers, and they'd be very slow, much slower than the computers that we have as individual human beings. These people invented all of that stuff, and they believe that the universe is consciousness, and then we're part of it. So how come we're not listening to the wisest, most practical scientists that we've ever had? Well, and I'm not saying to believe this theory. I'm just saying you got to live life open to the idea that you don't know what the universe is, what life is. It could be what I just said, or it could be the dark passage that you've always assumed that it is. But you shouldn't be making any assumptions. You should have your eyes open, your ears open, be attentive to what's going on, and you may see some clues that lead you in one direction or the other. That would be empiricism. That would be good. That would also be being yourself rather than listening to authoritarians who tell you the things in this way or that way.
Mm. Yeah, I think I guess to circle this back round and wrap this episode up, it sounds almost like we've discovered through our conversation today that resistance happens on all these different micro levels in our everyday through procrastination, through like trying something new, moving into a new role, a different country. Resistance will pop up all the way. But actually, through our conversation today, we've actually got these different layers of resistance, these different decks of resistance all sit on the biggest resistance of all is the question, why are we here? Right. And that we are obviously resistant to think about or understand because actually it blows our mind and none of us can actually prove anything, right? And it starts us we don't want to question that because then life just it blows our mind, right? So resistance is sitting on this huge, huge bed of why are we all here? But we're not asking you to solve for that today. We're literally asking you to look at the very top of in your human behavior in your every single day is just to understand and recognize. And we hope that through the course of this episode, you're able to recognize what resistance looks like for you, how to identify it, and hopefully you've taken some practical examples and tips with you that you can try next time you feel it. Thank you so much, Bill, for another wonderful episode. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us. We'll be back next month with episode 18.
Thank you all.